Hello again, adventurer. It is so good to be with you. And there's so much to explore in today's episode. The desire to find people like you, what it means to belong, how we communicate care across difference, overcoming fears to welcome newness, and the beauty contained in a moment when you realize someone that initially seemed quite different is just like you. But there's also a lot of messiness. On full display is also the desire to rule like gods, angry gods, and references, both explicit and implicit, to first contact between cultures, which necessarily reminds us, or at least me, of colonialism and all the messy evils that come along with it. Although this is a delightfully cute and funny cartoon, the realities of the questions that Finn asks throughout this episode are painfully real and consequential. Maybe some of the most real and consequential questions a person can ask. What does it mean to be human? To belong? What's the difference between being human or just another wild animal? And if we're all wild animals, brother, what does that mean for how we relate to each other? What has it meant historically? Okay, take a deep breath, because I want to get pretty real about this for a bit. Because I think the truth, even when messy, is important to look at, as honestly as we can. And I think that it is important to be honest about histories of violence and good intentions gone astray, and what those things mean about how we care, and what we care about. It might be scary to look at these shadows, but don't worry. We'll talk about these things incrementally, by degrees. Please note that this intro is a little longer than usual, so if you'd rather read the transcript for this on Substack than hear me say it all, feel free. And I'm including lots of links and references for you to dig deeper into these histories at your own pace, but I do encourage you to do so. First, it matters how we think about people who are different than us. The history of people labeling other people as backward, savage, wild animals, or any number of other demeaning things is long and messy and well documented. The idea that there are civilized people who know more or are better than people of other cultures, often indigenous cultures, is the foundation of colonialism. As early as 1452, a letter issued by the Pope authorized Portugal to reduce, quote, Saracens, being Muslims, and pagans and any other unbelievers to perpetual slavery. This letter is a foundational text in the doctrine of discovery, which is the common narrative that America was discovered, when in fact it was already inhabited with tens of millions of people. This papal letter provided a religious justification for the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa by putting non-Christian people in a firmly different category. And this difference was used to defend their complete objectification and exploitation. The language used to describe natives, black, non-Christian, and other people deemed uncivilized were associated with stereotypes of their incompetence, their violence, their backwardness, which ultimately shows how words can be used as weapons that create a hierarchy, where one group is defined as superior and the other is labeled as inferior. But on top of just words being used as weapons, colonial genocide also used real weapons, lots of them. And in this episode, Jake makes a joke about Susan being felled by surface world germs, and in reality, diseases introduced through colonization wiped out a majority of the native population, but this was not always passive or incidental, with documented cases of blankets from smallpox patients being given to native communities. Okay, let's pause. But Tiffany, you're thinking, this has very little to do with today's episode, and besides, I would never give someone a blanket infected with smallpox. So, for the first matter, I generally agree. I don't think the show is intentionally invoking this messy history, and I don't think it's wrong or bad for telling a similar story without addressing all this. But it does exist in a cultural environment which is built upon the foundations of genocide and economic exploitation. The episode does make jokes about surface germs and ruling as angry gods and the differences between people and wild animals, with depictions of a less intelligent people becoming irrationally violent, But I'm not trying to cancel this show. I love this show. But I also think these histories are really important for us to talk about, reflect on, and learn from. And they are different than the histories I was taught as a young person. So more to the point, whether or not the show cares about all of this, I care about these histories. And I think you should too. And I also believe you would never give a person a smallpox-infected blanket. So bear with me for the next incremental degree. Second, how we think about who or what a human is affects all of us. My thinking about the category of the human was most profoundly changed by a brilliant Jamaican thinker, writer, philosopher extraordinaire, Sylvia Wynter. I highly recommend a video I'm linking, which offers a brief overview of her life and thinking. But one of the main points she makes is that what it means to be human is a particular kind of story we tell ourselves. She carefully traces the history of this story, who is included and excluded from that story, why this matters, and how it has shaped our world. These stories of the human affect all of us, and if you aren't thinking about these directly and critically, it means you are accepting and perpetuating the ones that are most culturally dominant. And these are stories whose foundation is genocide, slavery, economic exploitation, and objectification. These are stories that are worth deconstructing and reimagining, but mostly have continued uninterrupted. Which brings us to our next and final incremental degree. Third, sometimes you think you're helping when you're not. Or you're being told that someone needs your help when maybe actually you need theirs, or probably you both need each other. In the cases of colonialism we've been exploring, this is sometimes called paternalism. The idea that modernizing and civilizing indigenous people has been used for centuries to justify conquest and domination. The idea that indigenous people need to be modernized and civilized has been used for centuries to justify conquest and domination. Some, maybe many, of the people involved in this process had really good intentions when judged from their own perspective. They thought they were helping save people or helping them learn. But in the process, colonialism imposed its own values, way of thinking, economics, and social hierarchies onto cultures, and in the process eliminated, minimized, or severely changed the other culture in the process. In reality, a great deal of what we claim as democracy, freedom, or the better values of civilization actually started with and was more successfully embodied by indigenous civilizations. David Graeber and David Wengrow explore this in their text, The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. And as a couple brief examples from this text, they cite a Jesuit priest who reflects on the Wendat people in 1644. Quote, "I do not believe that there is any people on earth freer than they. There is no punishment which is inflicted on the guilty, and no criminal who is not sure that his life and property are in no danger." Or a passage by Benjamin Franklin, who laments that when Native people are brought up in colonial culture, but then revisit their native community, quote, "there is no persuading them ever to return," and that when white persons of either sex have been taken prisoners young by the Indians and lived a while among them, though ransomed by their friends and treated with all imaginable tenderness to prevail with them to stay among the English, yet in a short time they become disgusted with our manner of life and the care and pains that are necessary to support it, and take the first opportunity of escaping again into the woods from whence there is no reclaiming them. End quote. And today, indigenous people make up a small percentage of the world's population, but take care of a vast majority of its biodiversity. And all of these examples are intended to suggest that, in the long view of colonialism, the people who were often deemed backwards and in need of help have in fact been among the largest contributors to helping protect ecological balance and equitable relationships between people and the earth. Which is to say that it's dangerous when we begin to think that we know what's best for someone else. not only because we may start to make choices on their behalf, but also because we stop listening to the things they have to teach us. But okay, enough out of me. If I think about this too much, I get all soul-searchy and weird. So let's just sit and be with all the weird instead, okay? So here at the beginning, as you're settling, if you want to shake any part of your body, your arms, your legs, maybe tap, maybe moan, maybe sigh or wiggle, kind of inviting some movement that feels okay, and then slowing it down and coming into a posture that works well enough for you right now. Doesn't need to be the perfect posture, just something you can commit yourself to. It's of course okay to move, but giving yourself the permission for this time to be one of stillness and simplicity as much as it can be. If breath feels okay, you can take some deep and intentional breaths as you arrive in this moment. I've just shared a lot of really heavy and true shit about our world. And you can get curious if there's any part of your mind that's circling around some part of that specifically, or some tightness in your chest or in your throat, some feeling of heaviness or heartbreak or anger or sadness about where you find yourself positioned in relation to these histories. You don't have to lean too far into it, but just getting curious about how these histories show up as you think about them right now in your body. Where are they in your body? From there, I invite you to turn attention to the indigenous people who have kept the land that you're on for centuries before you were here. Maybe you know them by name as a people. Maybe you know something about them. Maybe you don't know anything about them at all, and you want to make a dedicated commitment of care to learn more about who the stewards of the land you're on were, and maybe are. Maybe you are native yourself and carry the torch of knowledge and wisdom and power in your own way. And wherever you find yourself in relation to indigeneity in your world, in the land you are currently on, just taking a moment to extend gratitude as genuine and sincere as you can for the many invisible gifts of abundance and care that you receive every day from generations of people who lived in close relationship with the earth. There are countless things to learn, to remember, to reconnect with in our relationship to the particular spot of earth that we live on. And just staying with this feeling of gratitude for anyone anyone who has done the work of creating those gifts for you to receive. Of course, as you reflect on this gratitude, this interconnectedness or indebtedness, your mind will likely get up and wander around, think about other things, or focus on grief or sadness, and all of that is okay. When you notice that's the case, can you begin again, starting fresh, being attentive once again to the sense of gratitude, to the many keepers of life and food and water and ways of being that have helped you live with freedom and pleasure. Known or unknown. And as you stay with this experience of gratitude, I invite you to call attention to the ways in which care can be receptive, can be a little more passive. What are the ways in which giving care can actually mean humility, can mean deep listening, can mean admitting you don't know and have a lot to learn. Of course, there are times when care means speaking up and being active and teaching and holding space. But for now, I am inviting the object of focus to be times when care is quieter, when care means going slow, means admitting you may be wrong or that you don't know. When care means remembering that the people you try to give help to also have ways in which they help you, in which you can never be whole, can never be yourself without the many gifts of care that other people give. But that if you don't learn how to receive these, then it's easy to remain closed off and isolated and naively, arrogantly believe that you don't need them, that they have nothing to teach you. And that simply isn't true. Can you welcome the small, careful part of yourself that welcomes this dependency, this mutuality, this need and reliance on a whole world around you that gives care to you? And this may be fuzzy or abstract or intellectual or whatever, and that's okay. Can you relax back, move back? Can you allow the receptivity of care to come to you in whatever form it is? You don't have to go out in search of it. It's already right here, rushing towards you from every angle. A world overflowing with care. All right, that's great. As always, if there's some physical movement or self-touch or activity or whatever that you need to extend to yourself, that your body is calling for, I encourage you to do that now. I also encourage you to take action, to take care in learning about the indigenous people on the land that you're on. Even if you feel you know a lot, there is more to learn. And if you don't know their names, their histories, their stories, I encourage you to go about learning those in ways that are appropriate and respectful and involve deep listening. As we continue this practice of care, it's important to remember that care comes in many forms. And it is easy to think of the most active ones, where we go out into the world and extend our care to others. But a part of the balance, a part of maintaining our sense of integratedness and connectedness to the world, also means receiving care. It means being humble and knowing when we have more to learn, when other people have care they can give to us. I think it's important to remember that anyone who is in need of help would also be capable of giving help if the circumstances were more equitable. And indeed, almost anyone who is receiving help in one area is also giving it to others in many others. We are all part of this vast and interconnected network of care in the world. And this practice is simply about paying a little closer attention to it, getting quiet and learning what it feels like in our bodies, how it shows up for us, what it reminds us of. And this is vitally important work. So thank you for doing it. Thank you for sticking with me as I care about these histories and share them with you. I hope you can find ways to be kind to yourself and carry the truth of these stories forward. Till next time, adventurer.